Carpathians, Journey to the Heart of the Mountains. This story will consist of 20 chapters, which will tell about Stanley's journey to the Carpathians, a mountainous region of Ukraine, where he will immerse himself in nature, meet local residents, hear legends and myths, and understand the true meaning of these ancient mountains. Each chapter will be dedicated to a separate part of his journey: interactions with people, mystical encounters, and reflections on life. Chapter 1: Back to Nature. After a busy trip through cities, where noise and commotion became a part of his everyday life, Stanley decided to take a break from urban dynamics and go to the Carpathians. This decision matured in him for several months, and now he was ready for a new challenge: a return to nature, where he hoped to find peace and inspiration. The first hours of the road were filled with nostalgia and excitement. As Stanley left the tall buildings and crowds of people behind, he felt the stress and tension leave him. The landscape outside the car window changed from homogeneous cityscapes to green meadows and mountain ranges appearing on the horizon. He came to a small village on the outskirts of the Carpathians. The locals greeted him with warmth and curiosity, and Stanley immediately felt that something special awaited him here in the mountains. According to the guide who advised him, this very village is the gateway to mountain trails and places that keep many secrets and legends. Stanley was ready to dive into a new world where nature and people are closely intertwined. He stayed in an old mountain hotel with a panoramic view of the huge, green mountains. The evening fog covered the peaks, giving them a mystical appearance, and the air was clean and filled with the aroma of pine forests. The first night in the mountains was filled with restless dreams. Stanley dreamed of the ancient times when these lands had witnessed great events and stories. He dreamed of the shadows of ancient spirits wandering among the trees, and he felt that these dreams had some deep meaning. Morning greeted him with bright sun and cool air. Breakfast at the hotel was simple but delicious: homemade cheese, honey, and bread made by local residents. After breakfast, Stanley went for a walk in the village, where he met local residents. Their faces were marked by sincerity and kindness, and they willingly shared with him their stories about life in the mountains. From the villagers, he learned about ancient traditions and customs that have been preserved here for centuries. The city was famous for its cultural heritage, as well as legends about spirits and sorcerers who, according to their beliefs, lived in the mountain forests. These stories fascinated Stanley, and he felt that these legends could become part of his own journey. Noting the importance of this local culture for him, Stanley decided that his next step would be to meet a guide who would help him get to know the region better. He knew that without the help of a local resident, it would be difficult for him to really understand the essence of the Carpathians and their magic. Ivan, a local guide, met Stanley the next morning. His face was wrinkled, but his eyes shone with warmth and wisdom. Ivan turned out to be very understanding and friendly. He explained that the Carpathians are not just mountains. They are a place that lives its own life, keeping ancient secrets and stories. The first walk with Ivan gave Stanley the opportunity to enjoy the beauty of nature and learn about Carpathian traditions. Ivan told him about ancient paths that lead to hidden places where you can feel the true energy of the mountains. Although the journey had just begun, Stanley already felt that it would be one of the most memorable and transformative journeys of his life. The Carpathians promised him many discoveries and experiences, and he was ready for this exciting adventure. Chapter 2: Meeting the Guide. After the first day in the Carpathians, full of new experiences and impressive landscapes, Stanley felt that his journey had just begun. The morning of the second day brought him a new level of excitement, because he was to meet Ivan, the guide who would be his guide in this fascinating and mysterious part of the world. Ivan, an older man with deep lines on his face but with young eyes, met Stanley outside his hotel. His demeanor was confident and calm, which immediately inspired trust. Ivan is dressed in traditional Hutzel clothing, an embroidered jacket and wide trousers, which indicates his deep roots in the local culture. "Good afternoon, Stanley. I am glad that you came to us. The Carpathians open only to those who are ready to understand them," said Ivan, extending his hand for a handshake. "Good afternoon, Ivan. I'm ready for any adventure you throw at me," Stanley replied, feeling his heart beat faster in anticipation. They got into Ivan's old Jeep and set off deep into the mountains. The road they were traveling on was narrow and winding, passing through dense forests and high hills. Each turn opened new panoramas, green valleys spread out below and mountains that rose high into the sky. On the way, Ivan began to talk about the Carpathians, not only about their natural beauty, but also about their significance in culture and folklore. He described the mountains as living beings with their own spirit and character, and recounted the many legends that were passed down from generation to generation. The Carpathians are not just a geographical place, Ivan began. This is a real world where stories and myths are intertwined with reality. Here, every stone, every tree has its own story. Stanley listened, immersed in Ivan's story. It became clear to him that these mountains are not just part of the landscape. They are a living part of culture and history. Stopping near a small village, Ivan offered Stanley to walk along the paths leading to ancient shrines and historical monuments. They visited a small church preserved from the Middle Ages and the grave of a local hero who died fighting for freedom. Ivan not only talked about history, but also showed Stanley how people interact with nature. He showed him how to collect medicinal herbs and berries used in traditional medicine. This knowledge was not only interesting, but also important for understanding how people live in harmony with nature. These herbs not only heal, but also give strength, Ivan said, holding a small bundle of dried herbs in his hands. They are part of our lives, part of how we communicate with the spirits of nature. Stanley felt that this day was not only a journey through the Carpathians, but also a deep immersion in the local culture. He realized that in order to really get to know this land, he needs to perceive it not only through external manifestations, but also through internal experiences and emotions. By the end of the day, when the sun began to set, Ivan suggested that Stanley stay in the village for the night. This gave him the opportunity to feel the real rhythm of life of local residents, to see how they prepare food, how they celebrate festive events, and how they spend time together. The evening in the village was filled with sounds of laughter, music, and traditional songs. Stanley sat by the fire with the locals, enjoying the simple joys of life in the mountains. He began to understand that this journey was not just physical, but also spiritual. He felt his connection with the Carpathians deepening, and this inspired him to new discoveries. Ivan looked at him with a smile, realizing that their journey was just beginning. The evening fire burning in front of them was a symbol of the great adventures that still lie ahead. Stanley felt that his journey to the Carpathians had just begun, and he was ready to immerse himself in this exciting and mystical world that was opening before him. Chapter 3: In Search of the Lost Forest. As the sun rose above the horizon, its rays touched the top of the Carpathians, dispersing the morning fog and lighting the way to the next part of the journey. Stanley and Ivan embarked on a journey that promised to be not only a physical, but also a metaphysical test. Today's route was not like the others. They were to visit the so-called Lost Forest, a place mentioned in many legends and about which there were many mystical rumors. The Lost Forest was located in the depths of the Carpathians, far from the usual tourist routes. Local residents said that this place keeps its secrets and is home to the spirits of nature. To believe in these legends or not was a personal matter for everyone, but for Stanley it was another opportunity to learn more deeply and unexplored. Ivan led them along a path that led through dense forests. Every step in this forest was special. You could smell the aroma of ancient trees and wet moss. The forest was alive, and Stanley felt that there was a special bond between nature and those who could listen. The Lost Forest is not just a place on a map. This is a special world where time stops, Ivan explained. Legends say that here you can find answers to the deepest questions, but only if the heart is ready for it. They passed through narrow paths, strewn with fallen leaves that crunched underfoot like fragile crystal. The forest was so dense that the light came through only in spots, creating a magical atmosphere. Stanley felt that each step brought him closer to something significant. After several hours of walking, Ivan stopped by an old oak tree that looked as if it could tell 1,000 stories. Ivan pointed to it and said that this oak is one of the greatest shrines of the forest. This oak tree was here before people started writing down their stories, Ivan explained. He is a symbol of the strength and wisdom of the forest. Stanley walked up to the oak and touched its rough bark. He could feel the invisible energy of the tree passing through his hands. It felt as if he was connecting with something ancient and majestic. After they had spent some time near the oak tree, Ivan suggested that they rest and have lunch. They set up a small camping table and began to prepare a simple dinner: stewed vegetables with local spices. Ivan talked about traditional dishes prepared in these places and how food is connected with rituals and ceremonies. The lunch was simple but delicious, and Stanley felt that this moment was important in understanding the local culture. Food was not only a means of nutrition, but also part of a common tradition that connected people with nature. After lunch, they continued their journey. The forest became even more mysterious, and Stanley felt that every step could reveal a new secret. Ivan leads them through places where time seems to have stopped, and where every sound, every smell has its own meaning. At last they reached a place that Ivan called the sanctuary of the forest. It was a small opening in the middle of the forest, surrounded by ancient stones and thick undergrowth. Here, Ivan arranged a small ritual that symbolized thanks to the spirits of the forest for their hospitality and protection. Stanley watched this with great interest. He felt that this ritual was not just a formality, but a real connection between people and nature. The ritual was full of symbolism and deep meaning, and Stanley felt that these moments were important to his understanding and connection with the Carpathians. After completing the ritual, Ivan led them back to their camp located in the village. The evening was calm, with a wonderful view of the sunset beyond the mountains. Stanley, tired but satisfied, felt that this trip had brought him new sensations and discoveries. Before going to sleep, sitting by the fire, he reflected on what he had seen and heard. The forest became for him not just a physical space, but a living organism with its own soul and history. It was a place where he could connect with something bigger and higher than himself. New adventures and discoveries await tomorrow. Stanley felt that his journey through the Carpathians was just beginning, and he was ready for all the challenges and opportunities it would bring. Chapter 4: The Mystery of the Crystal Well. After a busy day in the Lost Forest, Stanley and Ivan set out on another journey, this time to the Crystal Spring, which was rumored to be a place with special properties. Legends claimed that the water from this source has magical qualities. It can cure physical ailments and restore spiritual harmony. These stories caught Stanley's attention, and he was full of anticipation to learn more about this mysterious place. In the morning, the weather was clear and sunny, which was suitable for a new adventure. Ivan, losing little of his usual reserve, told Stanley the details of the route. The source was in the depths of remote mountain gorges, and to get to it, it was necessary to go through unknown paths and cross rivers. The first few hours of the trip were uneventful. The trail was clean and clearly visible, and the scenery was stunning in its beauty. When they reached the first river crossing, Ivan told them that in these places water is a sacred element, and rivers have their own magic. This river, like many others here, has its secrets, Ivan explained as they crossed the stone bridge. Locals believe that water spirits can give advice if properly invoked. After the crossing, their path continued through a dense forest, where the paths were almost invisible. Each step became more like an attempt to penetrate the unknown, and Stanley felt that this place defied easy description. Everything was unusual here, from the huge, moss-covered trees to the mysterious calm that enveloped everything around. When their journey approached lunchtime, Ivan offered to make a stop and have a snack. They found an open clearing overlooking the surrounding area, where Ivan told another part of the Crystal Spring legend. According to stories, the spring not only restores physical strength, but can also help find lost self-confidence and give strength to overcome difficulties. They say that the one who comes to the spring with a pure heart will find the answer to his biggest question in it, said Ivan, spreading his lunch on the grass. But if the heart is not open, the source may not be what the legends describe it to be. After lunch, they continued their way to the source. Already closer to the evening, when the sun began to hide behind the mountains, they finally reached their final goal. The Crystal Spring was located in a small hollow among the rocks. The water that flowed from under the stones was transparent, like glass, and sparkled in the last rays of the sun. Stanley went to the spring and dipped his hands in the water. It was cool and refreshing, and he felt his body fill with new energy. Ivan pointed to a stone near the spring on which ancient symbols were carved. This stone is part of an ancient ritual, Ivan explained. Locals believe that these signs help to connect with water spirits and receive their blessings. Stanley sat down by the spring and tried to decipher the signs. He wasn't sure if he could understand them, but he intuitively felt that this place had its own special meaning. The water that fell on his hands seemed to inspire him to think deeper about the meaning of life and his own searches. When the evening came to an end, Ivan suggested staying at the spring for the night to experience the true magic of the place. They built a fire, and Stanley felt the surrounding nature come to life in the night light. The sound of a crackling fire, the cool breeze and the light of the stars created an atmosphere that gave a sense of mysticism. Stanley watched the water continuously flow from the spring and felt his thoughts about the past and the future begin to come together. Here at the crystal well, he felt like he had found a part of himself that had been hidden in the shadows before. At night, he slept by the spring, feeling calm and confident. When he awoke early in the morning, the sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon, and the spring was once again sparkling in the light. It was the moment when he felt that his journey was becoming a real journey not only on Earth, but also in his inner world. With new powers and senses acquired at the crystal spring, Stanley was ready for further adventures and discoveries. He knew that his journey through the Carpathians would be filled with even greater secrets and amazing events that were just beginning to unfold before him. Chapter 5: Legends of Spirit River. After the experience at the crystal spring, Stanley and Ivan set out for a new destination, Spirit River, which according to legends was one of the most mystical rivers of the Carpathians. As the locals said, this river was a sacred place where the waters had the ability to materialize and manifest as images that revealed personal fears and hopes. The River of Spirits was known for the fact that its waters could change depending on the emotional state of those who approached it. This place was surrounded by many myths and legends, and, as Ivan said, the locals believe that the river can not only show images, but also give advice and prophesy. In the morning, Stanley and Ivan set off on a trip again. They walked through the forest paths, which were again surrounded by thick bushes and tall trees. On the way, Ivan talked about the stories and legends surrounding the River of Spirits. The River of Spirits is not just a river, it is part of an ancient ritual, Ivan said. The locals say that if you go to the river with a pure heart and an open mind, you may see images that will show you the way or help you find answers to your questions. Walking through the forest, Stanley noticed how the atmosphere around him was changing. The feeling grew, as if there was something special in the air. It seemed that with each step the forest became more and more a part of the magical world, and the journey itself took on new shades. At last they reached the river, which was situated in a narrow canyon among high rocks. The river was transparent, but on the surface of the water floated some vague images that seemed like living shadows. Stanley and Ivan approached the water, and Ivan began to explain how to properly address the river. Ivan made several ritual gestures that, he explained, were intended to induce the river spirits to interact. For the river to answer your questions, you must first make it clear that you respect it and are ready to listen, said Ivan. It can be a simple question or a dream. The main thing is to be sincere in your intentions. Stanley stood by the water and formulated his question in his mind. He wanted to know what awaited him on his journey and whether he would be able to find his place in this big world. Plunging his hands into the water, he closed his eyes and tried to feel something more than just the cold wetness. After a few minutes, he felt the water begin to change. Images appeared on the surface that resembled scenes from his past, as well as moments that could happen in the future. It was like a movie unfolding in front of him, and every image was filled with emotion and meaning. The first image showed him the moments of his childhood when he was happy and carefree. It was like a reminder that his roots go deep into the past, and that those moments shaped him as a person. The river then cut to a scene where Stanley is standing on top of a mountain, looking out into the distant horizon. This image symbolizes your ambitions and dreams, Ivan explained, watching Stanley's reaction. The river shows you your inner aspirations and the possibilities that open before you. Stanley continued to watch the water and ponder what he saw. The images became clearer, and he began to realize that these visions could be more than just symbolic. Perhaps they were instructions that would help him find answers to the important questions of his life. As evening fell, the river began to look normal again, and the images disappeared from its surface. Stanley and Ivan sat on the shore and discussed what they had seen. Ivan explained that the river can change its images depending on the inner state of a person, and that these visions can be very individual. "What you saw can mean different things to everyone," Ivan said. "It's important to understand and accept what the river has shown you as part of your own journey." They stayed by the river for the night, and Stanley continued to think about what he had learned. The river of spirits became for him not only a part of the journey, but also an important stage on the way to self-discovery. Each image and each scene helped him better understand his inner aspirations and fears. In the morning, before going on, Stanley felt that he was ready for new discoveries and challenges. The river of spirits left a deep mark on him, and he knew that this part of the journey was an important milestone in his journey through the Carpathians.